Hi everybody, it's Stephanie. Welcome back to my channel. So about 3 weeks ago was the first anniversary of Animal Crossing New Horizons. And if you played lately, you probably got a beautiful, gorgeous cake in your mailbox. Once I saw this cake, I immediately just dropped every other idea I had and I decided to make this as my next project. Animal Crossing has been my favorite game all throughout 2020, and I'll probably be playing this game until 2025 because I enjoy it so much. All right, let's get started on the first birthday cake for Animal Crossing New Horizons. We're going to need 2 9-inch and 2 6-inch cakes. Let's prepare our cakes before we stack them. This very bottom cake was only about 1 1/4 inches tall, so I am marking it with my ruler and my knife, and then I am just cutting off that top bit of cake. The next layer of cake needs to be taller, so I didn't want to cut the top off just yet, but I did trim off some of the rough edges. And my 6-inch cakes were cut in the same way too. Okay, let's start assembling the cake. I have here a square cake board and I'm piping a thin amount of buttercream onto it. I need just enough to get my cake to stick to it. And next I'm adding the smaller layer, the thin layer, over onto my board. When I look at the photo of this cake, the frosting layer is massive. It is a very thick layer of buttercream, which is always a good thing. So first I'm going to pipe this very thick layer of buttercream frosting, and then I'm going to pipe another thick layer of buttercream frosting, and this is going to just be a buttercream dam. And then the extra delicious part, adding the fruit. My daughter and I picked strawberries, oranges, and cherries because that's what she likes. But you can pick whatever fruit you like, and we actually thought that the strawberries tasted the best. Okay, I'm all finished adding the fruits. Doesn't that look delicious? And then I'm adding one more thick layer of buttercream frosting. And this buttercream frosting is a meringue frosting, which I will put down in the description box. And then once we have it all filled, just go ahead and smooth that out. You want it to be completely flat. There we go, perfect. Since this cake doesn't have fondant on the outside, I wanted to make sure the buttercream looked smooth and pretty, so I spent some time smoothing it out and perfecting it. I did go ahead and pop this into the refrigerator so that the buttercream will harden before I put the next layer on. Okay, my larger top cake is going into place, and I'm glad that buttercream frosting was cold so I could easily move this cake around. I wasn't happy with the top of the cake at this point, so I decided to level it, and now it is much better. It's a perfect square, and I'm going to next cover the top in buttercream frosting. Okay, that looks absolutely beautiful. The next step is adding the fondant. So I've already colored it green, and then I'm going to drape it over my rolling pin and unroll it onto my cake. Next, I'm going to run my hands along the edges of the cake to make them nice and sharp. And you can also use fondant smoothers to get it perfectly smooth. And if you take 2 fondant smoothers and press them together right at the corner, you will get an even sharper edge. This cake has beautiful swags right along the top edge. So my first attempt at making these, I used a circle cutter to mark half circles into the fondant, and then I cut the fondant away. To me, this looked only okay. I think they were a little bit too small looking. So I ended up completely cutting these off with my ruler and X-Acto knife. And then I cut out new and larger half circles of the green fondant, and I added those onto the cake. Let's make it even cuter and add 2 logs of fondant to each swag. So these were extruded with my clay gun extruder, and I will put a link to that in the description box. So I'm adding 2 more fondant logs to each swag, and I really think that makes it extra cute. Let's work on the details, starting with the hibiscus bushes. First, we'll need to make a batch of Rice Krispies. I don't usually use a recipe for this. I just melt some marshmallows in the microwave, and then I stir in the Rice Krispies cereal. Very simple and easy. Kids love these things. Okay, so next we're going to roll these into little balls. They don't have to be perfect. And be sure to spray your hands with cooking spray or else you'll have marshmallows stuck all over your hands. So we're gonna need about 10 of these. And then I'm going to drizzle white chocolate ganache over each of my Rice Krispies. And doesn't that look so good? Okay, and then once it's set up, I'm going to cover each one in fondant. And actually later on I had an idea that I could have covered them in a layer of green candy melts, and that would have been just as beautiful. And to finish off these hibiscus bushes, I'm going to add some fondant flowers, and then using the end of a paintbrush, I'm going to push into the middle of it so that the outer edges of the flower will extend. To finish off the flowers, I'm brushing water in the center of each flower and then sprinkling it with yellow sanding sugar. The fruits are up next, and these can be created out of fondant or modeling chocolate. Or to make this even easier, you can also use real fruit. So I'm cutting out a bunch of fruit shapes, and I went with strawberries, oranges, and pineapple. I made a bunch of these fruits, and I barely had enough, so make a whole bunch of them and then maybe a few extras. And then use your creativity and painting skills to paint the details on the fruits. Okay, let's move on to the cookie. This cake is actually surrounded in lots of different cookies, but I'm just gonna show you how to make one, and it is the beautiful apple tree. So I've already drawn the pattern onto the cookie with an edible marker, and then I'm going back in with some royal icing to fill in the entire cookie. And I will put the recipe to my favorite cookie recipe down in the description box. And once the cookie is dry, you can go back in and draw in the design on the tree trunk. And I'm finishing off the cookie with 3 red apples, and then I'm adding a little yellow highlight in each one and a brown stem. And the final detail I'm going to show you today is the number 1 that goes right on top of the cake. This is red modeling chocolate, and I'm using a template to cut that out. And then you can pop it into the freezer and it will get really hard, and then you can push a skewer right through the center of it. And there it is, all finished. Let's add the details to the cake. So I'm starting by adding all my different fruits. And I do wish that I would have put all these fruits in a perfectly straight line because that's what it looks like in the picture, but it is still beautiful. I think they look great. Let's assemble the cakes. My board has been covered in fondant and has dried out completely, and then I'm spooning some melted candy melts onto it, and then very, very carefully I'm moving my larger cake into place. And then to support my top tier, I'm adding 4 plastic straws as dowels. And then my top tier goes into place, and if you want, you can add a central dowel to help hold that top tier in place. And I'm finishing it off with all the beautiful decorations that we spent so much time making. My Rice Krispie treat bushes and the beautiful cookies. And to top it off, I'm adding the number 1, and also these look like stones to me, but also look like dollops of whipped cream. I wasn't sure what they were. And then my final cookie, it goes right on the top next to the 1. All finished with my Animal Crossing first birthday cake. And happy birthday to my favorite game, Animal Crossing New Horizons.